Welcome to the Mom Life Unscripted podcast, the podcast show that normalizes the struggles of motherhood without being a Debbie Downer or using toxic positivity. Stick around for motherhood journeys from everyday mamas just like you, plus how we're navigating this wild ride we call motherhood. You might even come away with some tips you can use to survive and maybe even thrive. Society puts so much pressure on us to be the perfect mom when there's no such thing. This prevents so many of us from sharing our stories for fear of being mom shamed. As my favorite sociologist, Brene Brown, says, shame is the most powerful master emotion. It's the fear that we're not good enough. If we can share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. We're all in this together, Mama. Hey, welcome back to Mom Life Unscripted. I'm so excited to have Cailin here with me today. Fun fact, we grew up, our parents lived across the street from each other. So I've known her, like 15 years, probably more.
Yeah, since freshman year.
Yeah,
Freshman year,
yeah.
I think.
So yeah, 2006 for me. So yeah, it's been a while.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, I'm so excited she agreed to come on here. She is going to be sharing a little bit about her journey through motherhood and how she's navigating some difficult family situations. And I know she's not the only one. There are lots of people that are in this position, and Cailin just handles it with such grace and kindness while also setting boundaries for herself and her family. And I just knew I had to ask her to come on here, like, because so many people are going to benefit from this.
Thank you. I'm trying over here. It's a difficult situation for sure, but um, you know, I like you said, I also know I'm not the only one, and I think it's still kind of a taboo topic to talk about
Oh,
navigating
yeah.
difficult, especially when that family relationship that's difficult is your family of origin or your siblings, your parents. Um, especially down here in the South, you don't want to air your dirty laundry.
Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of, I feel like that's a struggle because if we don't get it out and talk about it, then one, everybody's going to feel like they're going through it alone. But two, nothing's ever going to come of it. Now, granted, sometimes you can't control other people, right? So like, but as long as you've tried, I feel like try to have a conversation, try to set those boundaries, try to, do what you can, but if it's not happening, then it doesn't happen.
Right. Right. And I had to learn, I didn't know what a boundary was. So like I thought I
Oh yeah.
did because it's like, I'm like, it's a vocab word. Everyone knows what a boundary is. Like, I don't need to look that up. And I'm somebody who researches everything. Of course, I did not research that. And so I'm in therapy, and that's one of the first lessons I learned in therapy about 2 years ago. She gave me the definition of a boundary, and she was like, it's not about anyone else other than you. And I was like, excuse me?
Yeah,
What do
that's
you
so
mean?
selfish, right? That's what, like, at least what I
Yeah.
think of as moms and women in society. Oh, well, that's selfish. I can't do that.
Mhm. Well, I also thought boundary meant like control of someone else's actions. And like control's
Hmm.
not the word I would have used then, but that's exactly what I thought it was. It was like I can look at you and say, don't do that around me. Which yes, I can say that, but I thought it meant that person had to alter who they were or what they were doing when I said that. And my therapist enlightened me and was like, oh no, people are allowed to do what they want when they want, say what they want when they want. The boundary is you don't have to stick around for it. You don't have to engage. You don't have to, be a listening ear or a friend to anybody who, like, if you've set those boundaries and you've made them clear and they continue with that behavior or continue with the inaction, whatever the boundary for you is, it's not up to them to change. It's up to you to decide, am I going to stick around for this or not? And I did not know that that's what a boundary was. I genuinely thought a boundary was when I could look at someone and go, you've crossed the line, like I'm done with you, which I guess in some sense it is, but I
Right.
never considered it like I would tell people, and I was raised with the, you can't do that. You can't do this. You can't,
Mhm.
being told what I can and can't do. So I did that to other people thinking like, well, this is just how it would. No, apparently that's very unhealthy. I had no idea.
I feel
I
like a lot of us didn't.
yeah.
Because I didn't know about that either. And I feel like us 90s kids, that's kind of just how we were raised. I don't know, maybe not everybody, but I had a similar, you know, situation. Oh yeah, no, like you do this or you can't do this. And
Mhm.
um yeah, and I had a similar idea of what a boundary was. So that's very enlightening. Just like boom, first like not even 5 minutes, like huge truth bomb, huge enlightenment there. So
Yeah, well, the you can't, I would be in therapy talking about a difficult situation, usually with my family, and I'd say something like, she can't say things like that. And my therapist would go, well, she can. And I'd be like, you're okay with someone speaking that way? She's like, no, I never said I'm okay with it. I never said I support it or that I'd stick around for that. But to say someone can't say something is just simply untrue. And she's right.
yeah,
People can say what they want to say. It's up to us to decide, do I like this? Am I okay with this? Am I going to speak up? Am I going to be quiet? Or am I okay with this? Do I align with this? And
right.
I didn't have that big of a lens when it came to boundary. I thought it was this very small thing. I thought it was like rules. Um,
Yeah, rules. That's exactly
mhm,
what comes to mind is rules. That,
yep,
like we were raised, yeah, you do this, you don't do that.
right. And so it's not, that really shifted everything for me, I think. And that's that simple little conversation in one therapy session made it to where when I approached family members or friends, anybody that I had felt at odds with, it definitely made it to where I took a much healthier approach. And instead of me looking at that person I'm frustrated with and blaming them, I'd go, well, wait a minute, I'm feeding into this. I also play a part in this unhealthy situation. And that is a hard, difficult realization. Because you can be aspiring to be healthy. You can think to yourself like, I'm a super healthy person. I have all these
Right.
friends and all this support. But if you are willing to just step back a second and consider maybe the reason these relationships are so difficult is because I'm not respecting my own boundaries. Like,
Oh, that right there.
right.
I'm not respecting my own
Mhm.
boundaries. Oh, I feel
Which
I
is
don't,
unhealthy. And
yeah,
I don't know. It's a hard thing to say. A lot of people that if I do engage in this conversation, will get, a little defensive about that and maybe a little hurt. And I understand that because I felt the same way too. That's
right.
why I think therapy is such a safe space to navigate that because you're not doing it with somebody who you intimately know that it would hurt very much if they told you that. You go to therapy, it's a third person who doesn't like they know you in a way that no one else knows you, but
Right.
also they're they're neutral about it. So when they tell you that, it might sting a little bit, but not nearly as bad as it does if your mom or your sister or your spouse were to say that to you. So I always
Yeah.
encourage therapy for that conversation.
And I attest to that too, because my mom had chatted with me about holding boundaries with myself and other people. And she was like, I'm gonna give you some tough love.
Mhm.
And she's like, you have got to like respect yourself. And and it did hurt because I was like, what do you mean? But I also had gone to therapy, and hearing kind of the same thing from a therapist, it hit different because like you said, it still stung a little bit, but it's not nearly as hurtful, even though my mom wasn't like trying to be hurtful. She was just like trying to help me, but
Right. But sometimes it hurts coming from because it's so it feels critical. And it
yeah,
is, but
it's
what
good, it's tough
constructive.
love. Yeah.
It's a constructive criticism. So like it hurt a good bit because I, came into therapy. Oh, first of all, I went to therapy with no idea that I was going for family. I thought I thought my family was great. I was going for I have, oh, I'm sure I've told you, we've discussed it, the history of abusive relationships I've been in.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going for. And I absolutely, healed pretty much entirely. I'd say it took a while to get to that point from that. But I had no idea too that when you start therapy and you're like, okay, good, I've healed from this. Um, that means your brain is like, well, here's more that you need to unpack. And you're like, okay, wait. And that's kind of what happened with this family stuff is I had zero intention of going and feeling a certain way about my family. You know, I do love them very, very much. I always will. But there are some big differences between me and the rest of my family. And it's not like I think I'm something special. It's just I think being the oldest of my siblings, and I have a lot of them, and being the oldest of all the grandchildren on both sides, there's a different amount of
Me, I
yeah.
feel
So you understand that like the pressure, there's a lot
yes,
of pressure on me to do a certain thing, act a certain way, speak a certain way, look a certain way. I for the longest time felt like I was the poster child for look how happy and healthy our family is. And I believed it as well. And I think our family does have good, happy, healthy moments. It wasn't all bad, but
right.
there was a lot of it that like it's so ingrained and natural for our family unit to operate this way that when I call it out as unhealthy, it is so unthinkable to them that it would be because this is just the way it is. And you're being sensitive, you're being dramatic. This is, I'm sorry you have a problem with it, but the rest of the 30 members of the family don't. And that's kind of what I was experiencing. So when I went to therapy, I had this mindset of, look, I don't want to say victim mentality because I didn't feel like a victim of my family. I felt more like I just don't fit in. But it was definitely eye-opening when I went to her going, help me with these psychos, basically. And she was like, but also you're one of the psychos. And I was like, excuse me? What are you talking about? And she's like, but you are. Like, it's okay. You were raised by them. This is the environment you were in. You took those traits with you. However, what separates you is you're trying to get professional help to navigate these things that you didn't ask for, but have been given to you, and you recognize you don't want them anymore. And
Yeah.
so, like, take solace in that, but also don't deny that you share some of those toxic traits, and you will, because that's where you came from. But let's work on them. Stung, but now I'm like, oh yeah, that's normal. Like, of course, I was raised by toxic people. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have some
that's
toxicity in me that I want to work on.
and I feel like that's such a common thing that I see when people go to therapy, like myself included, um, is like, oh, well, help me. Like you said, well, I kind of went like victim mentality of, um, I not necessarily with my family, but just navigating some other personal situations. And I like was like, oh, well, I'm doing, and she's like, hold up, boo boo, stop.
Hmm.
And I was
Yes.
like, excuse, like, you're supposed to be on my side.
Yes. That's how I
No,
felt too.
absolutely not. And
Uh-huh.
but it's good because I needed that. I needed
Mhm.
that. Okay, I am not respecting my own boundaries when
Yes.
it comes to this situation. And I am not responding in a healthy way either when, if I get, snippy or what, that's
Yes.
not healthy. That's toxic. That's, how can I work on that? And
Yeah.
I think that's a huge misconception. Like, I feel like that's probably the biggest aha moment for therapy is, oh, wait, they're not just going to take my side
Hmm.
for everything. They're going to help
Yeah.
me actually navigate it and call me out on my nonsense, you know?
Yes. And that way, and it's so important that therapists do that because then, well, first of all, it's a sign of a wonderful therapist who knows what
Yes.
they're doing. But then when they do look at you and say, you didn't deserve this, and this is horrible that this happened to you, they mean it because they have not run out of the gate always saying that to you. Like
Right.
they're good at looking at you. Like the toxic, I would say things like, this is just a toxic cycle that my family is in, and I'm always a part of it. I'm so done. And she'd be like, and what's your role in that toxic cycle? I'd be like, I'm just in it. I didn't do anything. And she'd be like, well, let's
Hold on.
analyze that a little bit. And sure enough, it would be like, why are you responding that way? And I'd be like, well, I'm not going to let someone speak to me that way. And she's like,
Oh
good.
gosh,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
like, I feel this so much. I'm not gonna, and so like you get back in their face. I don't know if you do,
Yes,
but
I
if
do.
you're anything like me, yeah, you get right back in their face and they're like,
Yes. And the therapist is like, I love that you want to stand up for yourself. Did you know there's other ways of standing up for yourself that is not the same thing that they're doing to you? And I was like, well, I'm not doing the same thing. I'm just matching energies. And she'd go, matching energies is great in certain circumstances. But if
right.
someone's being toxic and mean or whatever to you, that's not neutral or positive. If it's not neutral or positive and you've got a problem with it, you cannot match that energy if you want different energy from that person. And I was like, oh, that makes
That makes
sense.
sense. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Like maybe there's a point there. So, I learned a lot about, I'm not a therapist. Let's clarify that. I don't want to speak. I'm going to talk about things I've learned in therapy, but I am not a therapist.
Right.
I do not work in that field. But I learned a lot about the gray rock method, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with
No.
that. So when like someone's like yelling at you or any type of thing that you do not like, and normally you would respond with, hellfire back. I didn't know that that is somebody purposely trying to get that reaction out of you to continue this cycle. And they might not even be aware of it. They could also
Right.
be unconsciously involved in the cycle. Not everybody is aware of their toxicity because I certainly wasn't aware of mine.
Me
Um,
too.
right. So the gray rock method is basically just being as bland and as disengaging as possible, but you're not being mean, you're not being unkind, and you're not giving them the cold shoulder and ignoring them either. It's an acknowledgement of what they've said, but zero agreement or zero thoughts or opinions of your own. So if my mom, or I don't even have to say my mom, anybody were to come up to me and start criticizing my line of work or criticizing my parenting, yes, my first instinct is to be like, excuse me, who do you think you
Right.
are? Here's all these points. And to like, go for the throat. And my therapist has taught me, well, that's not healthy. That's not going to get you the result you want. What could get you the result is just agree with them. And I was like, excuse me? She's like, agree with them. Who are they? Does their opinion change anything that you're going to do? Is their opinion hold any weight? And I'd be like, well, I don't want people to think that of me. And she's like, well, you can't control what people think. This person already thinks that about you. So just agree. Okay. Okay. You don't have to say, I agree. Just okay. Or if someone's saying something straight mean to you, like a direct personal insult, saying something along the lines of, wow, just wow, nothing further. Just,
Yeah.
oh, did you say that out loud?
So
Okay.
another thing that so I guess I didn't know what it was called, but I have heard of like that method. And like my mom actually has taught me too. One of the things in that situation, she'll just say, you just look at him and go, are you okay?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm like, that is so smart.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's if you don't feel safe enough to ask a question like that, or to respond with like a wow or okay, or like a attitude with it, just a neutral okay, or I hear you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Like
Right. Thanks. Thanks,
just
but no thanks.
right. And now the trick is I don't know about other people, but for the people I engage with that I have to use this method on, one okay or one wow is not going to stop them from trying. So they will keep going. And in those situations, that's when your boundaries come in. And it's, well, I don't have to be here. I'm a big girl. I have a car. I don't live here. I don't
Right.
live with you. So I'm busy. I'm going to leave. And you don't have to. And I used to think I would have to say, I'm leaving. Like I'm announcing my departure because of how
Right.
mad I am. But my therapist also was like, well, no, you can just say, oh, you know what? I forgot. I have a previous engagement, say something really, and they know why you're leaving, but you're not giving them the satisfaction of saying out loud or displaying, you're the reason I'm leaving because I'm so upset right now. It's just, and it's learning to not be upset. And that's the hardest
Oh,
part
yeah.
is like, you can play the part of gray rock and you can master that. But when you get home, I don't know about you. I say you, when someone
Yeah.
gets home, me, when I get home for the longest time, and when I say longest time, I mean up until like this month, I would do engage in that behavior so I could get out relatively unscathed and not perpetuate the toxicity. But then I'd come home and just sob and be
Yeah.
so angry and so sad and so these horrible feelings that were so heavy. So like, just because you're engaging in those methods to protect yourself and respect your boundaries and to disengage from the cycles, that's great. There's also that doesn't mean though that you really feel that way. And it might take a long time for
Yeah.
your feelings to line up with your actions. And from what I'm learning in therapy, that's entirely normal.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Um, yeah. And then another thing that all you were saying what reminded me of, I don't know if you follow Elise Myers on
I
TikTok.
love her.
I love her.
Yes.
She said um she was like working in like some customer service position or something, and like somebody would just like come fly at her with insults. And I don't know if she said this directly to the person or maybe it was just to herself. She's like, I do not accept that about
Yes.
me. I
I
do not
remember that
accept
one.
that.
Yes.
And I was
That's
like,
pretty much
oh,
it.
that is
Mhm.
amazing. Like,
Yep.
yeah,
I'm not accepting that. I'm not dealing with this. Yes. And
yeah,
it's, you can even say things like, I'm not comfortable talking about that. That was so hard for me to say for the longest time. Because my family members, I didn't know what a boundary was for a reason. They don't know what they are either. So whenever I would try to say, I would get so nervous. Like I'd have a physical response to it. My chest would hurt so bad. I'd feel nauseous. I'd get the adrenaline shakes because I get adrenaline pumping whenever I'm about to be in a confrontation. Um, and so I'd be shaky, cold, all of these feelings, all because I knew that I needed to say, I do not want to talk about that. I will not talk about that. That one phrase sent my whole body into fight or flight because I knew the reaction I was going to get was not going to be, oh, okay, and moving
right.
on. That was never, that's just never how it was for me, at least in my family unit. So it's still not that way for me. When I say things like that, I'm met with pushback, anger, very clear annoyance, or I'm given the cold shoulder for the remainder of our, time together because I will not do what they want me to do, say what they want to say, whatever it is. And that's definitely a hard one to navigate when you're a people pleaser. And I am definitely, oh, I
Yeah.
was one. Um, I don't
I'm
want people to be
recovering.
mad. Yes,
I
exactly.
am
I don't
a
want people to be
recovering
mad.
people. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, and that's so hard. And I feel like a lot of oldest daughters are the people pleasers, whether
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like um my relationship with my family is different than yours. We have a pretty healthy relationship, but I still have those. And I don't mean that in like a negative way or to rub it in your face.
Oh, you
So I
still have that pressure as the
yeah,
oldest.
right. So it's like I feel like even if you come from a healthy family or,
Mhm.
maybe a family that's a little bit at odds and not respecting your boundaries, that pressure to be a people pleaser as the oldest
Yes.
daughter, I feel like that's a society thing. Like that everybody I
Mhm.
talk to that is the oldest daughter, that is
Yes.
it.
It really is. And I agree with what you said about it. It really, if you come from a healthy family or a dysfunctional one, the pressure is the same. There's
Mhm.
different context to it. You might, I have different obstacles than you with that, but it's not the pressure to be, good, whatever good
Right.
means, the pressure to be good, the pressure to manage everyone's emotions. Um, that is huge. And I agree that, even from a healthy household, for whatever reason, And I think society has to do with it. And obviously our role as women has to do with it.
Oh,
We're
100%.
nurturers
Yeah.
and we're expected to be nurturers
Yeah.
too. So I think that absolutely is a truth that all of us experience. I'm sure sons experience it too. I just am unfamiliar with that. But,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
So I want to chat, like talking about the oldest daughter. So your oldest is a girl, and so is
mhm,
mine.
yes.
So I would love to kind of chat about how you are like, okay, I could just say I try to protect my daughter from those feelings.
Mhm,
Even though I know it's society, it's ingrained, but
right.
like what strategies are you using? Because I feel like we've chatted about this before and
Yeah.
trying to like not make them feel that way, I guess.
Yes.
So what are you kind of doing to hold boundaries with other people when it comes to well, I'm sure all your kids.
Hmm.
And, you know, if you could just chat about that.
Yeah. So the first thing that pops into my head is actually my sister sent me this song on Spotify, and I forgot, I'll send it to you after. It's a little kid's song, and it's called the Boundary Set Song. And she sent it to me. She has a little girl of her own. Her little girl is only 18 months old, but my sister and I were raised in the same household. And while I will not speak for her, we share similar views. So she feels also like what we're talking about of raising her daughter with a different lens.
Yeah.
Um, and so this boundary song, she found it, she sent it to me, and it's adorable. And my girls sing it all the time. And it's, obviously I'm not going to say that I can sing, but it's like, um, please stop. I don't like that. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I need more space, not
I
around
love
me.
that.
Don't take it personally. That's just a boundary. And it just keeps going. But my girls, you'll hear my 3-year-old singing that all the time. And it seems so silly, like it's just a song, but it like, they absorb everything. They're
Oh,
sponges,
yeah.
like we know, like they watch us like hawks. And I think music and like about those things is it sets a baseline, and my girls respond really well to music. All kids, I think, do. So
Yeah.
that's one way is finding something on their level that they enjoy, and they sing that all day long. And it's really cool to hear a little girl talking about like, this is my space. Bernadette, we talk about personal space a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Bernadette is 3, and that's my youngest, and her preschool teacher yesterday even told me like she has a bubble, which I've said before, but that's not something that I say all the time.
Right.
But she will tell her classmates, "This is my space. This is my bubble. Get out of
I
my
love that.
bubble." And she's 3. And that heals something in me because I did not have that.
Oh, yeah, no.
Right.
And I think that's too, I say that like I feel like that's the time we grew up in
Mhm,
is like we
yes.
just like even though, you just felt like you couldn't.
Right.
And I think that is so amazing. I'll link that in the show notes once you
Mhm.
find it. And that's something so I have one daughter who's my oldest and 2 sons. And so I just stress space and consent,
Yes.
to my sons. It's like especially to my
Yes.
daughter, but also to my sons because I feel like that part a lot of times is missing. Um
Yes.
and so I'm just like, okay, we ask before we give hugs. If they say no, no is a full sentence and
Mhm.
we're good. Like we're going to be respectful of that. I think that is just so important that
And you'll
holding those
hear
boundaries.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You'll
Oh
hear,
no.
a lot in my house, I'll say respect their no, or are you respecting their no? That is a regular thing. You'll hear my girls correcting each other, like, "You're not respecting my no, stop." And like so one of the things that I do very differently than how I was raised is, I don't know how other people would define this, but I allow what my family would consider back talk. I don't correct my daughters at all for telling me no. I feel very strongly that, you know, I'm their first line of defense,
Mhm.
and I'm their first teacher. Me and their father were their first everything. And if I am not a safe enough person for her to practice her boundaries on, then who is? And I feel very strongly like I want the logic to be when she's older and exploring her sexuality and engaging in activities that could be dangerous. I want
Right.
her to have the baseline of when I tell my mom no, she doesn't question me. She doesn't push me. She doesn't make me feel guilty for my no. I want that to be so unfamiliar to her that it's like repulsive. That when
Yes.
someone starts pressuring her, she's like, "Who are you? Like, get out of my space."
Yes,
Because
I love
her
that.
own mother and father do not do that to her. Because I remember using my parents as a baseline for what I wanted in a romantic relationship. My parents have a beautiful marriage. And I always used that as like, what do I want in a man? Is like, this is what I like in my dad. This is what I want. So I try to remember like that's how I did it. And that doesn't mean my girls will, but what if they do? I want it to be something that when they look back on it, it's powerful enough that their boundaries stand no matter who they're
Hmm.
with. Boy, girl, I don't care. I want
Right.
them, I let them say no to adults all day long that aren't even just me. And when the adults look at me like this, I'm like, what and what?
Exactly. Exactly. We had somebody who tried to pressure our daughter to give them a hug. And I was like, I was like, she said no.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they're like, really? And I said, yes, she said no.
Yes. And
And
that's
they're like, and I'm like, I don't care. Because I could
right.
see the look in her eyes when
Yes.
she was like she
She's
said no,
uncomfortable.
like exactly. And we talk about that too. Consent, like your body language is like if somebody's all like that,
Yes.
that's showing they're showing me with their body that they're
That's so,
uncomfortable and no.
yes.
Yeah.
That's so important. And I've had to tell my daughters that with each other. Siblings I think are a beautiful thing, but it's also they're also such good tools within the house,
Hmm.
like to have
Yeah.
another person your age or similar to your age to practice these things on. So I would tell my daughters, like, look at her body. Like there are more ways to say no than with your mouth.
Yes.
If her body is doing this, that's a no. That's a no. If she's not looking at you and nodding her head, it's a no. Unless you are getting a direct yes, it's no.
Yeah.
And if you need clarification, ask. You can ask, and so, and people, I think people have this concept of like, these are very difficult for concepts for children to learn, but
Oh,
they're
it's not.
not.
It's
They're
not.
not.
We push It's hard for us as adults who didn't like or who grew up in a time where that was like very like you didn't do that. It's hard for us, but it is really not that hard for them.
No,
Like my
and
kids, yeah.
right. Well, I think it's really interesting to see that they're born with it. They are born with this capability of recognize, like they just naturally respond to their nervous system without questioning it. And it's really sad for me and really beautiful to see like that's how I came out. Granted, it was forced out of me because of society and the way our
Yes.
family is. And that's painful to realize like my natural ability to respond to my nervous system was stripped away. However, I also recognize that that happened to my parents and that happened to their parents. And
Right.
it's a generation. Nobody, my parents didn't come from super healthy families and then decide they're going to be a dysfunctional one. That's not how
Right.
it
That's not
works.
exactly. That's not.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there is some empathy for them there, but it's still hard to realize like, oh, my daughter comes out with this natural ability to look somebody 3 times her size in the eye and say, "Don't touch me." Um, and all my job is to go, "Yeah, you heard her."
Yeah.
Like
I
that should be
love
all I
that.
do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important you talked about the generational. It's like being a cycle breaker.
Mm,
And some like I've seen people that come from super unhealthy families and they do what they can, but then they also have this unhealthy family. Then I've
yes.
seen people that come from a difficult past I can tell you my dad absolutely came from just horrific circumstances. And while he has made his fair share of mistakes and toxic behavior, that he has apologized for, which yeah,
Yes, that's
which was
big.
huge. I didn't even ask for an apology, but because when he actually apologized to me, I was like, look, I have recognized that this is a circumstance you came from. You did better than what you had. Was it still toxic? Sure. But you know what? You did the best you could with what you had. And
Mhm.
now, 31 years later, you're coming forth and you're saying, hey, I realized that was messed up and I'm sorry. And you're like taking accountability. I'm like, how many
I
people
love
do
that.
that? How many
Not my,
parents do that?
not
No,
my parents.
like, no, it's mind blowing to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And
That's ah, man, I want that. I want that. I would, oh, yeah, that would be so healing. And what a beautiful, because I mean, I can't speak for, the population. I didn't take a poll, but from my experience talking about this with fellow millennials, your experience is very unique to have your
oh, yeah.
parent acknowledge and apologize. And like, you know, I don't know, and I have said this repeatedly too to my parents when we talk about these things is I don't even need the words I'm sorry. Those would be nice. To me, apology is action.
Yeah.
Just do something different, please.
Hmm.
Go, please go to therapy. Please come to therapy with me. Like, or
Right.
or I will specifically say I don't like when I'm treated XYZ. And unless and until that changes, I will not be present. I will not be around. Um, I feel like there's no effort at all to meet what I need to be around. And instead, I'm criticized for the boundary I have set, the standards that I want. Um, it's often spun around on me like I'm called self-centered. I'm called dramatic, ridiculous. If it's not about me, then I don't want it. And I'm just kind of like, well, that's not, I mean, that's your perception. And if that's your
Right.
perception, like your perception's your reality, 100%, I get that. Um, I don't have to engage with that. I know what I'm doing. And I strongly feel what I'm doing is breaking cycles for my children. And there's a lot of trauma on both sides of my family that is pretty hard trauma. Probably, if you can think of the worst kind of trauma, that's what we're dealing with. And it's
Yeah.
on both sides,
Same.
all the way up, several
Yeah.
generations, culminating in me. And um, a lot of family members don't want to acknowledge that. And when I call it generational, I get scoffed at. Like, what do you mean it's generational? And I'm like, it's literally y'all, my grandparents,
Like, and
aunts,
so
uncles.
on.
Like,
Yeah.
it goes all the way up. It's a literal definition. And it's doing what I'm doing is very difficult, but I strongly feel like I get one shot at raising my girls. I get
Yeah.
one shot, and I can't go back. I can't fix it. I can't. Um, you know, there's no guarantee that I'm also going to have tomorrow with them. And that sounds really
Right.
dramatic, but it's true.
True.
And I just strongly feel like, if that means that I lose my family in order to protect my children and empower them with different tools in a different lens of life, then that's what that means. And my job is no longer to my family of origin, which is,
Right.
you
That's
know,
hard. Well, and I tell my family all the time, like my parents and I'm like, I love y'all so much, but my main priority is the 5 people in my household.
yep.
And they're like, no, you're right. And
Hmm.
I know that's again, I feel I'm not trying to like rub this in
No,
anybody's
you're
like I
not.
don't want it to come out
No,
like that, but it's
it
so
doesn't.
important. It's so important. And I love that you're kind of approaching that from like
Yeah.
acceptance and empathy. Like before my parents or before my dad was like, hey, look, this was messed up, I'm sorry. Before he even did that, I kind of went on a self-healing journey and I was like, you know what, this is the way it is, I can't change it. He did the best he could with what he had. acceptance, and then empathy. This is what he went through. And you know what? I harbor no ill will or anything like that. So it sounds like that's kind of the journey you've taken too, is like empathy that they went through trauma, but also acceptance, like I can't change that, but I'm going to be
Right.
better for my kids.
Yes. And it's also, it used to really bother me when I would hear people say your parents did the best they could, because it felt not you, like the way you said it is
No, no,
perfect.
and
But
no, in general, yeah.
yeah, like if I said like, I really just, there's so much history between me and my parents and I need to take a step back. I'm constantly met with, especially from extended family. Well, that's your mom, that's your dad. Those are your parents. You only get one mom, you only get one dad, or they did the best they could. And you know what? They did do the best they could. And sometimes that's still not good enough.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. I'm doing the best I can. That doesn't mean that my daughter owes me anything. Like she
Yeah.
didn't ask to come into this world. Like
Well, and that's the thing that
that's
is mind blowing to me. Oh, that's your mom, that's your dad, what about that's your daughter?
yes. I know.
Like,
What about me? Exactly. And I don't even mean it needs
n-
to be about me. It's just
no,
more
but
like, why do I have to constantly consider everyone else? And this goes back to the oldest daughter thing.
yeah,
Not about you. You need to focus on how everyone else feels. And
right.
I want to take back that agency. I will not. I will no longer consider how full grown adults feel about themselves or about my actions. That's no longer my job. And I think people are mad about that. They're used to
It's
me managing their emotions. And I'm
yeah.
like, that's your job, bud. It's not
Yeah,
mine.
well, and it's a societal thing too. I firmly like it's definitely the family,
Mhm.
your family feeling that way. I feel it's society too. Just
Yes.
you just have to do, and I'm saying no, no way. That's why I really wanted you to come on and talk about that, because I see all the time just you're handling it seriously with such grace and kindness. Like you said, you having empathy. That's being kind, but being kind does not mean being nice. You have to be kind to
Mhm.
yourself and your family too. And
Right.
that's when the boundaries come in play. I understand, I feel empathetic that happened, but I'm not going to let it affect the 5 people in my household, you know?
Right. Right. And there is also that tricky line of, and I see a lot of people, um, rightfully so, calling into question using mental health terminology as a way to like weaponizing it. And there are plenty of people who do that. But like we talked about earlier, about how a good therapist will point out how you play into your own toxicity that you're in, your own cycles. Like while you are great for coming to therapy and you have self reflection and you're working on it, part of that self-reflection is going, how do I contribute to this? What is my role in this generational BS? Like what have
Yeah.
I done to perpetuate it? What am I going to do to stop it? That means that like if you're in therapy and that's the kind of therapist you have and you're doing the work and you're willing to acknowledge how you play into it, then when you use words like boundaries, or you strongly feel or believe, with the guidance of your therapist, that someone is a narcissist or things like that, and you use those words, you're not weaponizing them because you're doing the work. You're with a
Right.
mental health professional who is willing to put you on the front line and be like, figure your stuff out.
Right.
But there are people who weaponize those words on purpose to put people in their place. They use the word boundaries when they don't know what the word boundary means. They call people narcissists because that's the popular term right now, and they don't like how someone's treating them. So I know some people might hear these words that we're talking about and feel like maybe we're just another Instagram post talking
Right.
about narcissists or talking about boundaries and gaslighting. But Instagram's not a therapist, and you should absolutely go to therapy and learn what these words actually mean. And then when you're on Instagram and you're reposting them, you are making sure they're from an actual mental health professional and that the
Right.
definition really matches the word.
Right. And not,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's so true. That's so true. Because I do hear that. Or, well, it used to be before narcissism, I feel like everybody would be like, oh, I just have anxiety. And I
Yes.
legitimately am medicated, okay, for
Yep.
anxiety
Me
and
too.
depression. Like,
Same.
and just a sidebar here, I want to say thank you for sharing your journey of anxiety and depression and getting on medication for it, because it helped me to do that, because I was so anti-medication for so long. And by that, I mean for myself, not for anybody else. There was no judgment. And I
Right.
just felt like something was wrong with me and all this stuff. But you and another mama just shared their story, and I get goosebumps. But like it made me be like, oh, I'm not alone. Like, I can go get help. There's nothing wrong with me. Look at them. They're thriving as parents, as moms on this Medicaid. Like, there is no excuse for me not to. So thank you for sharing. That was kind of like in our personal conversations
Yeah.
in the past, but
I'm so
it
glad
it
it helped.
really, yeah, it
That's the
really
whole
did.
point of sharing
Oh,
is to help.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I'm so open too, because I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, okay, these two mamas, you and one of my
Mhm.
other friends, um, they shared it with me, and I want to do it too, like,
Mhm.
pay it forward kind of thing.
Right. I think it's a big thing about the generational cycles thing and like on being online, generate being a cycle breaker is very difficult. And it also, I feel so self-righteous saying that, like I'm a cycle breaker, but that's not what I mean.
Right.
It's more like literally just what I'm doing. It's not a role that I'm trying to play or anything like
Right.
that. It's just I guess that's just the definition of the actions that I'm taking would be a cycle breaker, but I feel very alone in it. So an online community is essential, which is why you'll always see me posting things on Instagram about cycle breaking. Cause I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm not alone. There's people out here who are, posting about it and talking about it and recognizing like, you know, where, I don't think people realize like I'm willing to orphan myself. That's how
Yeah.
strongly I feel. And I don't think people recognize that. I am willing to prematurely be without my parents in my 30s if that's what I need to do to provide a better life for my children. And I
Yeah.
don't think people realize like that's the logic that I'm operating under is, that's your mom. I know you don't think I recognize how big of a loss this is to me. You don't think I feel it.
Right.
I'm not oblivious here. I know what I'm doing and it sucks. So some
Yeah.
support would be nice. Like,
Exactly. And it's like you're coming at it too from, you're a mom too, and your priority
yes.
are your three girls.
Hmm.
And it's tough. And I kind of want to segue into the holidays are coming up.
Hmm.
So do
Mm.
you have any kind of advice about kind of surviving the holidays and going through some of these situations?
Yeah. And also I'm pretty new to all this. This is about year 2 or 3 of this journey. Um, this will be my second or third Christmas. I don't remember which. Possibly my third. Definitely at least my second, but I will not be with my parents and my siblings or my grandparents. I visit my grandfather still around Christmas time, but I just stick with my nuclear family and my in-laws. My in-laws are wonderful. Um so the first time that I didn't go for Christmas or Thanksgiving, that was extremely hard. Expect a lot of feelings that you did not think you'd be feeling to be
Right.
happening. And it's perfectly normal to feel left out, to feel sad, even though you deliberately made this choice. It's okay. Like people will say things like that, like, well, you made that decision. Yeah, that doesn't mean you're not allowed to feel
And your
the
feelings are
effects of
valid.
it. Yeah, like
And oh, I'm
100%
sorry.
they're
I was just
valid.
I was just gonna say, something that my mom always told me is like feelings aren't right or wrong. They're just feelings.
Yeah.
There is no you like, now if you're angry and go hit somebody, obviously your action is wrong, but it's not
Yes.
wrong to be angry or
Right.
upset. Like
I
it
love
just
that.
is a feeling.
I love that. Like I didn't learn that till recently. I had no idea
Mhm.
that like I was shamed a lot for having certain feelings. If these feelings did not align with what my caretakers felt or the people around me felt, then it was like, what's your problem? Why? Like, that's, your issue. Or, there was no space for feelings that were inconvenient to the people around me. So that's definitely something that when you're coming up on the holidays, to give yourself space for those feelings. My therapist talks a lot about self-care, and I've had three therapists. It was supposed to just be two, but the other one had moved offices. So just to clarify, I'm not a therapist, but I'm not hopping around finding a therapist that just says what I want to hear. Not
I'm
what's
not a
happening.
therapist hopper. I
Yeah, I'm
love
not
that.
doing that. But they've all
So,
oh, I'm sorry.
oh
They've
no, go ahead.
they've all said things like self-care is so important all the time, but especially when you're doing something very difficult, like, removing yourself from an environment for the first time ever in your life. That is going to be extremely difficult for you. Even if you don't think it's going to be, it's going to be. And everyone experiences differently. So self-care, I didn't even know what that meant.
I was gonna say everybody thinks it's going to get a pedicure, so let's just that could be a part of it, but
Yes.
it's a lot more than that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what I thought. I was like, okay, self-care is like, I'm gonna go get a pedicure, which is fine. Like you said, it can definitely be part of it. And if that's all it takes for you to feel more grounded and connected with yourself, great. Like go for it. For me, it's yoga, which is,
Mhm.
and I don't go to like a yoga class. I'm very introverted. I prefer in my living room
Mhm.
after
I
everyone goes to
feel
bed. And I just do like free YouTube yoga
mhm.
videos. And I try to do it every night, but honestly, it's more like 3 or 4 times a week. And sometimes it's a 10-minute one, sometimes it's 30 to 45 minutes. Just and like I had to learn to not set these arbitrary rules on
that
myself about
that
self-care.
I literally just recorded a podcast all about that 2 minutes is better than 0 minutes when it comes to
Yes.
self-care. Yes, this is perfect
Yes.
because your episode is airing literally right after
Oh,
after
perfect.
this.
Perfect. Yeah, I didn't know that. So like I would go to myself and be like, well, I have to do 30 minutes of yoga every day. Well, then now my self-care feels like a chore.
Yes.
It's not self-care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care is, and I had to learn this. So it's not like I just knew this and like did it well. Like, no, I still struggle. There will
Mm-hmm.
be times where my depression's flaring up and I'm like, I don't want to move. I don't want to shower. I don't want, and self-care is not a shower because that's just basic hygiene. But when your depression's flaring and you can't even eat, showering is
Yes.
self-care now. And so
Yes.
like recognizing that self-care changes
It
depending
ebbs
on.
and flows.
Mhm.
Yes.
So yeah.
Sometimes, oh, I was just gonna say sometimes I literally am like, you brushed your teeth today.
Yes.
Good
Yeah.
job.
Mhm.
Like, and that
Yeah.
sounds gross to some people who maybe don't have depression, but when I like, it
Mhm.
gets to be that point, or I showered today. So,
Mhm.
you know, give being kind to yourself. It all goes back to being kind to yourself.
Yes, and like you said, feelings are just feelings. So
Mhm.
if you were someone raised like you were not, but if someone listening was raised the way I was raised with certain feelings are shameful, um, I just want to say for those people, like your depression's nothing to be ashamed about, and there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain chemistry is different, and
Yeah.
that does you could have been born that way, or like me, had several traumatic events happen to you
Yeah.
to where
Me.
your brain chemistry is now altered. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's not your fault. And how beautiful is modern medicine that we can change our brain chemistry back to what it belongs to. We can
Yes.
find that level, and sometimes it's going to flare up, and that's okay. And it's okay to, like you said, today I brushed my teeth. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Some days you're going to be like, yeah, I brushed my teeth. Of course I did. What's wrong with you? Other
Right.
days, that's all I could do. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, that's okay. That's more than
Yeah.
okay. And I just don't want anyone to feel that shame of, well, I'm so lazy, or I didn't do this, I didn't do that. So no, but like you gotta like my therapist would tell me, because I have horrible intrusive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
As soon
Same.
as you feel that, you've got to, and it took so much practice, and you're going to fail a million times before you succeed.
Right.
As soon as that line of thought starts, stop. Like, you distract yourself, put on some music.
I do not accept
Dance.
that.
Yeah, I do not accept that. Whatever you need to do, like, to stop that line of thought. For me, it's praying. Like, even if, and I don't even mean like a big formal prayer, like saying, I'm Catholic, saying the Hail Mary over and over and over again, because it's repetitive. It becomes like I don't know, like repetition will help stop other
Yes,
things for me.
absolutely.
Right. Kind of like music, I guess.
Yeah,
There's a
or
rhythm
fidget
to it.
spinners. Some people like need that,
Yes.
something like that, that
And
it's
I'll
just
say
very
it
calming.
out loud. So I'm
Yeah,
hearing it, which is stopping inner thoughts from coming in. So like that's something that works for me. Self-care for me also looks like journaling. And
oh yeah, that's a
again,
good one.
I used to be like, I have to journal every day. No, I don't. I think
Right,
sometimes I'm journaling several times a week. Other times it'll be 3 months before I do it.
right.
But it's something that, when especially like super traumatic things that are like that are not resting and they're just very active in me, journaling is,
Right.
because if you're dealing with like a lot of heavy trauma, I know from personal experience it is hard to find somebody to talk to about that without traumatizing them.
Right.
So
Or
writing it
reliving,
down.
I feel like, or reliving your trauma, or like,
Mhm.
I don't know, when I would tell people, because I was in an abusive relationship as well, um, people would feel sorry for me. I'm like, no, I don't want you to feel sorry for me.
Right.
Like, stop.
Right.
And it was just like, I felt icky, I guess.
Yes.
And so yeah, journaling kind of helps with,
Hmm.
managing that and processing it.
Right. And it's like you can still talk to people about your trauma, especially if you've, one a big thing that I've learned that is helpful for me, and I use it all the time. I use it in minor situations too, but especially with trauma and needing to talk to somebody. Like if you write it down first, now you've gotten like the nitty gritty out. So now when you're
Right.
talking to somebody, maybe you don't need to go into as much detail because you've kind
Right.
of processed that over here.
Yeah.
But also asking that person, I read people's emotions. Most people with trauma,
Yeah.
we're trained
Hello.
to do that,
Yeah.
right? People
Uh-huh.
pleasers, we read
Yes.
people's emotions. So a lot of the times, like if I went to go reach out for help and like the um response was like, what? Or I read their attitude wrong, or I would just immediately shut down and not even tell
Right.
them. I'd be like, never mind, never mind. Instead, now I do things like, hey, do you have space
Oh, I
for
love
this
that.
right now? Do you have some space? Like, I really want to talk to you about something that's kind of hard to talk about. Do you have the time and space for that right now? And be willing to accept the no.
Yeah.
Be okay with the not right now, but maybe later. And then when they have the space for it, it's legit. You're
Right.
in a safe space and you don't feel like a burden. You don't feel icky,
That's so
any of that,
important.
because that's a boundary that you're also allowing that person to have their boundaries. Because if someone comes up to me, I immediately would be like, tell me right now, even though I know I'm not in a space for it. I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. I don't want them to feel like I'm not here for them. So I know that's how I receive it. So I try very hard to like let the other person have an opportunity to say, I'm actually not in a good space for that right now. And I
Right.
learned that in therapy, and it's life changing.
Yeah, that's so important. And then I think I've even done that, like, one of our conversations I was asking, I even said, hey, do you have space to, it
Yeah.
was it was like kind of something that was going to be triggering about an abusive
Yes, you
relationship.
did.
And I just was like, I think I've learned, I feel like I saw you do something like that, and that's when, I came to you about that and was like, hey, do you have space? And I started using that. I feel like I saw you do it, and that's why
Oh,
I do it. So I totally copied
I'm
you.
glad you do. No, do like that's so important though. And I didn't come up with that. Maybe I came up with the phrase on my own because that feels natural for me to say it, but I
Right.
definitely was taught in therapy that this is an appropriate way to, instead of me trying to read someone's emotions, which you can't do. Like, I mean,
No,
like
yeah,
you think you can, but you don't really know.
exactly.
Just ask them. And I didn't know that that was an option. And then
Yeah.
my husband said something yesterday that I was like he was raised in a very healthy household. So boundaries, he's amazing at. And he was doing like, I don't know, Christmas shopping or something on his phone. And I asked him something about how something went with the kids last night because I had a meeting. So he put them to bed. But there was something specific. I was like, did this happen with Josephine? Is she good? Like something like that. And he was looking at his phone. He said, give me 1 second. I would like to finish what I'm doing. And this conversation deserves my full attention. And I want to give it its full attention. So can I finish this and I'll get to you. Do you
Oh
know
my
how
gosh.
loved I felt like to
What?
hear
I
not
love
like,
that.
yeah. And it wasn't like in a minute, not right now. It was, you deserve my full attention. I know I can't give that to you right now. I,
That is
I
amazing.
right. The boundaries, like I didn't know that boundaries were love. I had no idea that boundaries are love.
Love for
Um,
yourself, love for the other person.
yeah, to say like, because that was him telling me like, hey, I want to hear what you have to say. It's important to me, but also respecting himself and knowing full well that my husband has severe ADD. I know they've recently changed it to where it's like all ADHD or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
He has severe ADD. So for him, he really means it. Like, I can't give you that right now. Like he's not just saying that. And it's so cool to see him have his boundaries and like he doesn't feel guilty about it. He's just like, no, this is where I'm at. And, you know, early on in our marriage, I don't think I would have received that very well.
Right.
Um, but, the more work I do on myself, the more when he says things like that, I'm like, I feel so loved right now. Like,
Yeah. And what a great example he's setting for the girls, both of
yeah.
you. Like, so
Mhm.
him in saying that and you receiving that well. So it's like it goes both ways
Yeah.
about setting the boundary and respecting the boundary. So that's
Yes.
amazing. I love that.
He's pretty he teaches me a lot just by being himself because of the vastly different backgrounds that we
Right.
have. Um, and my sister Claire is really good at holding boundaries too with me. And a lot of people I don't like, again, I would have never 2 years ago thought someone holding a boundary with me would mean they love me.
Right.
But it really does mean that. So sometimes she'll be like, I just don't want to talk about this right now. And 3 years ago, I think I would have been highly offended. I would have
Yeah.
been like, what do you mean you don't want to talk? I want to talk about this right now. Like, what
Right.
about, but now when she's like, I just don't want to talk about that right now. I need a minute. I need
Yeah.
space. And I'm like, oh, no problem. Okay, let's change the subject. Let's this. But without knowing that boundaries for yourself means love for someone else, without
Yeah.
that I would have never, but it really does, because then what would have happened? I would have talk to her when she wasn't in a space to receive it, meaning I wouldn't get the response that I needed or
Yes.
was looking for. Now I'm resentful. She's resentful. And we're in this weird situation where neither of us want to say that we're unhappy with how this conversation went.
Right.
But with the boundaries, none of that happened.
Yeah. That's
And the next time,
amazing.
it's really eye-opening when you start enforcing your boundaries and then you surround yourself with people who do the same.
Oh, wow.
Very
Yeah.
different vibe. Very different vibe than what
That's
I'm
so
used to.
important. Yeah, and that's so so important. Just to surround yourself with people. And I think too it's important that sometimes your family, if you have a tricky family situation, you can create your own family, either if you have a partner and you have children, or if it's just your partner, or even if it's just your friends. You can
Yes.
create your own family. If
I
I think
also a
that's,
lesson I recently learned. Yes.
yeah, absolutely. So before we sign off, do you have any kind of last minute pieces of advice or maybe something that we didn't cover that you wanted to chat about?
Oh, I think just when you're raising kids, which I'm still new at, my oldest is only 7, but I will
Right.
say I've got 3 girls, and we were talking about being the oldest and the pressure and the people
Mhm.
pleasing and managing people's emotions. Um, Something my therapist had said about managing people's emotions that stung for me, but was so truthful. And when I had this said, brought to light, it really changed how I interacted with people involving managing emotions. Is she'd go, that's a control thing for you. And I'd be like, no, I'm not controlling anything. And she'd go, you are, this is a self-defense mechanism. I'd be like,
Mhm.
no, it's not. I just want people to be happy. And she'd go, why? Why do you need people to be happy? I don't want them to be mad at me. She'd go, right. It's not about actually making them happy. It's about you don't want to experience these uncomfortable feelings from
Mhm.
other people. You are protecting yourself. It's not you. And like to hear, like, you don't actually want other people to be happy was like me going, that is so not true
Yeah.
because it's
Mhm.
not true. Like I do genuinely want people to be happy, but she's so right that that was not the primary motivation. The primary motivation was I want to protect myself. I don't want to deal with uncomfortable feelings. And it's because I wasn't taught how to. So
Yeah.
I didn't know that that's what I was doing. So that I think is something that is hard for people who are people pleasers to hear is that you're not actually trying to make people happy. You're protecting yourself from something.
Mhm.
Um, and that,
That is huge. That's so huge.
right. And like when my therapist said that, I was like, ow, oh no, I'm going to need a minute with that one. But then it really helps me that when I want to please somebody, I'm like, it makes me stop and go, why am I doing this? What am I
Mhm.
afraid of right now? Is this genuinely, I want you to be happy? Or am I having a fear of abandonment right now? Am I having a fear of, backlash? I don't know, whatever it is. So that is something I definitely want to share because for me, that was life changing.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and then my girls just about raising them to be different from how I was raised is allowing my children to tell me no. We talked a little bit about that, but I also mean in ways that are, at least for me, are usually met with like a side eye from other parents. Like if I say, hey, Genevieve, can you feed the dogs right now? I'm okay with her telling me no. And some people be like, what? Like your kids need to have chores or they need to do this or need that. They do. But also, how do you feel when you're in the middle of a task and someone comes up to you and says, go do this? You're like, I will not. And I don't
Right.
know why that's, or like, I will after I'm done this. Why though is that limited only to adults? That
I,
doesn't really make
that's
sense
so
to
true.
me, you
Yep.
know? So, sometimes I'm like, okay, baby, I understand, but like, we really need to do this right now. And sometimes I do have to pull the mom card and go, I said that we need to do this. Go do this now. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I do try to remember that I don't want to be interrupted when I'm clearly in the middle of
Mhm.
something to do something for someone else. If it's not necessary in this moment, it's okay if my daughter
Right.
says not right now, or can I finish this first? Um, you know, that's to me not a respect thing. I think it was ingrained in me that that's about respect. That's
That's
control.
compliance. Yep. It's compliance.
Compliance. I don't want my children to be compliant. I don't want
No.
blind obedience because if they give me compliance and blind obedience, I mean, that's their base. I don't want that to be their base. I want them to
Yeah.
question. I want them to push back. Um, I want them to challenge me regularly, because that's going to be what happens in the real world, right?
Yeah.
Constantly told that's not how it works in the real world. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Watch.
is.
Watch me.
Yes, I'm constantly told what to do or asked to do things that I don't want to do. And my baseline was we'll make everybody happy. So I
Right.
do all the things, I say all the things, and it's always at the expense of myself. I've learned that that's not healthy for anybody. Even the people I'm pleasing, it's not helpful for them. It's not
Right.
helping me in my relationship with them. My girls are watching me do that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
That's a big
I,
one.
they're watching me worry about how someone else is feeling. And like, yes, I want my children to be empathetic and I want them to be aware of other people's emotions and how their actions impact it. However, I also always tell my children, who's in charge of your emotions? And they say, me. Who's in charge
Mm-hmm.
of mommy's emotions? Mommy.
Right.
You do not make me sad. I am choosing to be sad over this. And I'm allowed to do that, but that's not my 7-year-old's problem.
Right.
That's mine. Yeah.
Exactly. No, I love that. That's so important.
Sorry, I didn't mean
All
to like
right.
go on a tangent there, but that
No,
was what
but I think everybody needs to hear that. That's why I'm just so thankful that you agreed to come on here because the insight that you've shared in our time together is just like mind blowing. I love it. I love it.
I'm
And
glad.
I think so many other moms that are in a similar situation need to hear it. And even if you have a healthy relationship with your family, still some of these parenting, I guess, tactics or
Mhm.
techniques or boundary setting is still so important to hear, no matter what kind
Right.
of family you come from. So I just
Mhm.
really appreciate you. It really means the world to me that you'd
Thank
agree
you.
to come on here.
It means the world to me that you asked me. Oh, I was so nervous, but I
Oh,
was
girl,
excited.
no.
But I'm so excited to do it. And thank you for just like you're so supportive of other women. And that's something that I love and try to emulate from you is you don't look at other women as competition
Oh,
or
no.
anything like that. You're just like you go girl and you provide opportunities for those women to talk about whatever they need to talk about or like you willingly share it on their behalf and it's beautiful. It's
Oh,
beautiful.
I love, I've had so many people, kind of like behind me. I like, help bringing me up to where I am. So like I always want to like help, we rise
Mhm.
by lifting others. That's the saying. Like
Yes.
I'm all about that. Um, one of my um one of the mom friends I have, her name's Jenny, and she's also like an entrepreneur, but she says community over competition. And I just like emulate that
God.
all the time. And she'll actually be a guest I think in January. But yeah, so I really appreciate you. That means so
Oh,
much. Like
no, I
I
mean
love
it.
that because that's really what I'm trying to do is help
Mhm.
provide space for other women because sometimes it's hard for us to speak up and I've noticed sometimes it could be a lot easier if somebody invites us than if we
Yeah.
just take the space ourselves. So I really just wanted to provide that opportunity for everybody.
You're doing a great job. I feel like you really found your
My
niche here.
calling.
Yeah.
Yes, I told my mom the other day, I was like, okay, so like I have found it. Like this is
Mhm.
what I am meant to be doing with other moms and supporting other like because we need it. Oh my gosh, do we need
Yeah.
it?
And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I've been watching, through social media and not in a creepy way, but
Right.
like
No, not a
watching
stalker
you on
way.
your journey. And whenever you said I announced that you were doing this, I was like, feel like that's it. Like, cause I've seen like I read one or two of your blogs and like your community, the messy minivans moms is I love that too. And like your t-shirt and all that t-shirt business and all of that was wonderful. And like I thought you were successful in all of it, but this feels different. This
Yeah.
feels like
I am
a
so glad
different
you said
level.
that. Like I just got goosebumps because I literally feel the same way. The outpouring of support. It's
Mhm.
like when you find what you're meant to be doing, I feel like there's a lot less resistance. It feels
Mhm.
effortless. It's still hard work, but it's
Right.
effortless. And
Yes. Hmm.
that's it. Like I literally said that last night. I was texting my
Yeah.
mom and I was like the because the first episode dropped yesterday,
Yeah.
the premiere episode, and I was brought to tears by how supportive
Mhm.
and all the love I got. Like that I feel like I didn't really ask for. I just
Yeah.
threw it out in the world. It was like, "Hey,
Yes. Oh, I loved it. It was so nice to hear. I don't feel like we hear a lot about moms talking about the postpartum rage and how like and to hear that being openly talked to. I've read a couple articles on it. Like
right.
we all know it's a thing, but like to hear a mom be like, "Nah, that was real." And to hear her be so vulnerable too about like I was angry or upset with myself and I felt like, well, no one cares about me when I'm not pregnant, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna that vulnerable thought process, like it's so refreshing to hear another mom just say it because
We're all thinking it."
yes, and like if you're the one person to say it and nobody backs you up, you now feel shamed or
Right.
something's wrong with you. And so it was very bold of her and brave, I think, to
Yeah.
talk about that. And she's definitely not alone because that
Oh no.
postpartum rage is real. And I
For
I
real.
experienced it too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
me too. It's bad with my first one. So it's, I think it's amazing. Laura's a big mental health advocate too.
Mhm.
And it's just, we just both, decided this needs to be shared. Nobody's talking about this. Everybody
Mhm.
sees the Pinterest mom, which I'm all about. Okay, look, I try to be a
Mhm.
Pinterest mom, but nobody shares the raw, the real.
Right.
And we all feel so alone and we all feel like we're failing, and it's absolutely not true.
Right. And I feel like, it's there's something different to what you're doing too, because like you are saying, like it's not toxic positivity, it's not Debbie Downer, which is true, but there's something different. Like it's because there's several, like I write for New Orleans moms, and like
Yeah,
there's amazing articles and moms are writing about all kinds of things, but I do feel like we're kind of stale on the parenting topics, and not New Orleans mom in particular. I was just using that as an example of like blogs across the internet,
right.
video podcasts across it. It's we're talking all about the same aspects of parenting without getting super vulnerable about it. And
Agreed.
I think for the time that they were doing it, like the last 10, 20 years, it was very vulnerable. It was very new. It was very like,
Right.
you know, revolutionary.
Right.
But now it's time for like we need something deeper. We need to we need to talk about how depression's not just I don't want to get out of bed. It's also like I didn't off myself today.
Yeah.
Like that's a real
Mm-hmm.
that's we're now finally reaching those levels of like, oh yeah, I just don't get along with my family. No, my family's toxic. We're gonna
Yeah.
go there now. We're gonna talk
Right.
about that. So I
Because
feel like you're providing that platform.
well, that's the goal. Just to I want to help other moms. It's so lonely. It's
Mhm.
so lonely. It can be debilitating. And when we get lonely, we don't want to share. We get shameful. Brene Brown, I'm obsessed
Love
with
her.
her. She's like, if we can share our story with somebody and it's met with empathy and compassion, shame can't survive. And
Yes.
that is like, I want to emulate that. Let's talk
Right.
about it. Let's get
Let's
vulnerable. Let's help other people. You're not alone. You're doing a fan freaking tastic job being a mom.
right. And if you are aware that like I don't like how I do this and I want to do it differently, already top tier mom.
Mm-hmm.
Already like the awareness that you do not like something about your parenting and you desire to better it. I don't know very many moms, at least in my private circle, all my mom friends now
Right.
do that. But
Same.
before this awareness of my own, no, I didn't know any mom who was just like, yeah, I suck at this and I need help and I would like to be better. Like nobody was openly saying that. Nobody was openly saying like, how do you do this? How do you do that? It wasn't until I was willing to acknowledge that I don't like what I'm doing that suddenly relationships with other moms who felt the same way were able to grow. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you have to say it out loud to find your people,
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This was awesome. I'm so excited for everyone to hear about this. Just so many good things and so timely with the holidays coming up.
Yeah, I'm
So,
excited too. I'm excited.
yay. If you made it this far, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Mom Life Unscripted, the podcast show that normalizes everyday struggles of motherhood without being a Debbie Downer or using toxic positivity. If you like this episode, please be sure to rate and review the podcast and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. And don't forget to grab your free resource linked in the show notes below, 10 quick and easy steps to avoid mom burnout. See you next time.